That's what
That's the first trip.
they're okay for now. Yeah. They'll have meetings.
Still required under occupancy.
I will later on. Well, you might want to do that. I
I spoke with staff about it just now. That will be the next work session. That will be addressed.
Then a lot of it becomes a waste.
You understand the issue?
Well, I understand the issue. I don't understand the resolution.
We will get there.
Okay.
Which is a terrible answer, but that's my answer today.
Okay.
Your concern is noted and they are preparing.
Okay, how are you doing? Oh, it was good. How about you?
I did.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no rushing that. Sending us emails complaining that we're
Just technical piece of
What I would have said. Not knowing exactly where they're gonna be.
Yep.
Thank you for clarifying
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Lots of there.
I mean, Michael and Ron will be here. So
I think you're right.
This is just kind of actually expensive for what it is. Yeah. Maybe I'll start out. I took a picture. You know, everything's up. Oh, I know. The house. I can't believe that's
Yeah.
two of these books.
It's also funny because in all of the like nice military stuff.
Oh, they only have the book. But I thought it was so. Oh, it's still. I do,
Yeah, I always knew,
Yeah, we do.
I always knew you were gonna be, yeah, we have an important piece.
It's like, the SUV only has this.
Jefferson's
So.
escaped from October. Oh, so that's what. your research is.
Yeah.
And we decided to, there's no. The rat.
You went to go get something.
That's a thing.
That's what you saw me walking around.
The British Carlton is coming.
Did under Zoom.
And then March. Day and night.
Hey, how you doing?
Hot.
Well, I'd say.
Keep it up, keep it up, keep it up.
At best.
Keep it coming.
Good. How about yourself?
There's some others, but
Start out.
Yeah, I met him. I used to know for alcohol.
yeah, it's like a flash.
It took them 14 years to go 14 days. But they stopped themselves. So we're
State.
It's a long process to go.
British get to the state of it.
Oh, yeah,
Feels like email news.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah. So it's like.
Fourth of July?
It was absolutely, completely, totally uneventful, which is a good thing considering all the events that are happening. We did a little cookout on Saturday and shot fireworks off. So we're gonna avoid.
Yeah, it sounded, I mean, the city didn't have fireworks, but it sounded like there was plenty of them.
Yeah, we had fireworks out at the lake. And Crozet, Lake Monticello,
Yeah.
Crozet.
Yeah, we went actually to Boar's Head. Cool. There were a lot of people, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to meet you in person. Yeah.
I thought it was already.
Well, let us know what you think on day 300. That's good. So am I. So see, we're both having fun together. Brian, she's in the middle.
Nice to meet you. Right, right. How's this meeting going? Is it 2 or 2? Is it 4?
Yeah, I don't, it's not till four.
Once it's 4, it ends up 4, which would be more than a little pain. Okay. Hopefully, you're right.
But it's,
Welcome all. Thank you for coming. You may remember that we talked about this before. This is a continuation of a previous conversation. Mr. Preach, can you help us continue?
Can I just do 1 or 2 logistics?
Please, we love logistics.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for everyone coming today. I'm Missy Cruci. I'm the Deputy Director of Neighborhood Development Services. This meeting is work session style, so we're not going to have a verbal comment from the public at this meeting. We do have cards and pens available for in writing, as well as emails that come in throughout this meeting will be part of the record. But it's just an opportunity to allow these groups to have some dialogue at this point in time amongst themselves. So I'm gonna come around and pass out pens and cards as needed. And that's all the logistics I have. Thank you.
Mr. Preach, where will we?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see everybody bright and fresh off a holiday. This is a continuation of the meeting we had, I think, back in May. That was looking at the zoning map, and we had gone through a number of topics already in that map. The errors that we had identified in the zoning map, those places that where a map change might be made that would be still consistent with the land use map and the comprehensive plan. Our objective for today is to look at those those changes that we've had comments on that would not be consistent with the land use map in the comprehensive plan. I want to note something in our memo on this topic. We referred to this as requiring a comprehensive plan amendment. I want to correct that a little bit and recognize that those changes that we might talk about today that represent an increase in the allowable density on a site relative to what's on the land use map, those would require us to go back and make an amendment to the comprehensive plan. Those changes that would reduce the intensity of use relative to what is in the on the land use map would not. So if in this conversation, there is a conversation around phasing or anything like that, that is something that we can do without going back and making amendments to the comprehensive plan. I say that also because I just want to note right here at the beginning, one of our concerns as we go forward is that making changes to the comprehensive plan, making amendments to the comprehensive plan at this point as part of this process is also going to bring an element of complication into this process. And I want to just be aware of that as we go.
Thank you. In terms of logistics, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how best to process this information. And I hope you'll have patience with me. Are you familiar with the draft in the football? Excellent. So my concept is we go around, and if you have one that you'd like to raise, you can draft a request, one of the 33 requests. And if you don't, you can say pass, and that's completely acceptable. If you do select one, we'll discuss it, staff will take notes, and then we'll move on. Is this reasonable?
What tab in this spreadsheet should we be focused on?
Two,
Flum changes?
yes, two phone changes, that's right.
So last time we met, we went through tab 1.
We did we did the latter ones. We started at the end and worked our way to the beginning.
Mr. Duranzio has been kind enough to already submit a request, so Mr. Duranzio, could you start us off?
Sure. Are we gonna put the map up on the big screen or what are we doing here?
We do have the map on the big
We
screen.
have the map on the big screen. Okay, so I started to talk about this one. This is, it's designated as item 4. It is actually kind of item 1 on the Plum Changes map. That would be hydraulic Swanson Cedar Hill. That's where everyone familiar with one of that. Here's my, they are presently this area, yeah, let's go over here.
Yep.
Over here, all right, a little more, there you go. We can make this a little larger there. Oops. All right, so what we have here is to orient everybody, that's Shops at Somerville, obviously. Plus, we've got hydraulic. These are, this set of folks here are currently B1. Comment number 4 speaks to this sort of block here. That'll be to Swanson, to Cedar Hill. So Cedar Hill, this is not really a through street here. You can only enter from this direction because we've got a triangle here. And we cannot enter from Shops at Somerville. There's a light there. The issue here, of course, is that is put in there to stop Cedar Hill Road, which takes itself all the way down to then connect with Wayne and Bridge or whatever. It's over Barracks Road. Because this would become, if you didn't do that, this would become, Death Race 2000. So having said that, this road was not originally a through street. Cedar Hill had stopped here in North Berkshire. And then with the water feature that's here along the road, and then it resumed again. And I'm not sure exactly when this was opened up, but it was at least 10 years ago. So having said that, these properties here are all single family or 2-family residences. Some of them are owner occupied, a couple of them are small time landlords. And they're sort of organic affordable housing. And this is the Meadows here, which we've identified as a sensitive area. So my argument is that if it's B1, it said we're supposed to go to CX5. Is that where we're supposed to go on this?
Yeah.
That we need to look at keeping this as some sort of residential because we've got existing organic affordable housing here right now, and zoning it up that way is a ticket for bad things happen to it.
Do you have a specific thought in mind?
I would say that we look at changing this to RA or RB, depending. I'm more inclined to RM. I think leaving the stuff that's on hydraulic itself at some sort of commercial stage is fine, but taking it down Swanson and Cedar Hill off those first lots, they're residential properties now, there are 4 of them now, we need to treat them like they're residential and keep them as an RA.
Other discussion on the side?
So one piece of, yeah, I'll just mention for people's situational awareness, that intersection at Cedar Hill and hydraulic is, it's highly like, well, anything with VDOT and smart scale, that's not, I shouldn't say highly likely. It seems reasonable.
Within the realm of possibility.
It seems reasonable that over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, that will become a roundabout. Just like the roundabout that's in front of Whole Foods.
Yes.
Or that's planned to be there at Whole Foods. So what that will do is it will let people come in and out of that part of the neighborhood from all directions. So I think that speaks to the point that it lines up with your point, Phil, that this is gonna be an area that's gonna have, gonna be more and more attractive for people to move into, I think.
Well, to speak to that, also the current triangle there that's in front of the name Cedar Hill is actively preserving the residential character now, because it makes it, I don't want to say undesirable for commercial, but it's awkward for a commercial enterprise to be there. Hey, how do I get there? Well, you can't turn left to that light. You gotta go down to the next one, turn, make a U-turn, and come back if you now get into this neighborhood, gets the commercial spot. And that, I think, in part is preserving some of that as residential housing there now, because of the practicalities and the grounds of the highest and best use. If we're gonna have a change in the thoroughfare there, we've got essentially affordable housing that's organically occurring. And if we move to a more thoroughfare type street, that is also a ticket to developing it.
I think that what you're gonna see is there will be more traffic coming down that road, not less. And I also think that to build that roundabout, some of the adjacent housing is gonna have to be taken by eminent domain.
There are at
So,
least 2 houses there that'll be gone.
yeah, so I think you're gonna have less of that organic housing left after they're finished with this roundabout.
So. I want to do one thing on this too. The two families, not the affordable, but the comment was referencing are along Swanson Road in this direction. This is multifamily, this is commercial, this is commercial.
So,
So we have two families just on that one.
so these, not exactly right.
I'm just looking at it.
So these are 4 duplexes, these 4 here, and 2 of them are gonna be demolished. This is an office building, these are 2 duplexes and then a house. This is an office building and this is a multi-family.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is, it's pointing at hydraulics, which is the office building, we obviously leave it, that's in the multifamily. That's there, but these 2 units that are along both stretches on both Swanson and Cedar Hill, and I think there's a 1 unit here, looks like a 1 unit. Cedar Hill, it might, I mean,
On the east side or the west side?
the east side. But it's not with Oregon, it's either one or, it's either one that looks like it's 2 or it's, there are 2 that looks like a 1 or it isn't 1, but it's probably one of those first 4 lots on that side. I think if you're I do those things to be converted into commercial buildings.
If you don't change, like you
If we
indicated,
don't- if we don't make some effort to keep it residential,
so you had suggested
hey,
RA. In making that suggestion with the potential down the road of a roundabout, what would that mean?
so what that would mean is, and I think, and I don't know if he's gonna knock down or what, we're saying the house on the corner that's actually a commercial building goes. And the one on the
It
other
would be,
side.
if you were to be going north on Cedar Hill, it would be, if you could now turn
Get up
left,
there, so I
that,
can
that
see,
corner
please.
there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, Rory is helping me.
So roundabout will kind of be here.
Yeah.
It'll involve just a kind of split lane here. These
Yep.
2 duplexes are gonna be demolished. There'll be 2 left on this side,
Uh-huh,
and then the 4 on this side. This one's a state farm office.
Right.
building. These 2 are duplexes. not
Correct.
single family.
right.
Right,
So essentially, there will be 2 duplexes left on this side in the RX.
you're saying it's too good.
5. These two on this side go. On this side.
With the roundabout,
In the current, like,
In
ground.
the current configuration.
Yeah.
okay.
So, and
So you
that's
end up
going to
with just
increase the traffic
2 on this
throughput,
side.
yeah, which is going to make these highly attractive commercial.
But if you change,
It's
to,
better than it is now, infinitely better than it is now, which is you can't get in.
Ms. Brady?
but if you change, then they would be protected. Is that
Right,
what
they
I
would
hear
not
you
turn into-
saying?
They would not turn into straight up commercial.
Okay, okay. I understand now. Thank you.
Yes.
Is there, is there any advantage to leaving the lots that front on hydraulic under this commercial designation
but the lots that do not front on hydraulic, leaving them as residential,
We're changing that to residential.
or changing them to
Yeah,
residential.
well, that would be what I'd advocate. I mean, the stuff that's on hydraulic is commercial now. It has commercial use. It has, commercial
Yeah.
driveways getting in and out. Let's leave it
So
where it
he's
is. But once
protecting
we're
the
going down those
residential
two
with his
I
proposal.
mean, part of my concern is that I would hate to get to a situation where we are so determined to maximize housing that we don't allow for commercial uses in places where commercial uses make sense. Because one of the things that will happen if you take away that sort of what I'll call naturally occurring commercial use, it's right across the street from the shopping center, is that if you intend to have commercial uses permissible in RB and RC, you end up giving people no other place to have a commercial use other than an RB and an RC. And I'm not sure that that's a good idea. So I just don't want to end up getting into a situation where our blind commitment to more housing completely forgets the other purposes of zoning.
I agree. I'm applying heightened scrutiny to this because it's an existing sensitive area. It's existing people who live there right now in affordable situations. And I think that we ought to leave hydraulic basing absolutely alone. Okay, everything they want. I don't see any point in doing that. But once you get 2 steps back from hydraulic, you are in a quietly suburban type neighborhood. And I don't see the use in putting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lots at price.
So I think I have a proposal that kind of hits a happy medium here. And so on the left side, we have 4 duplexes, right? And on the right side, we have an office fronting hydraulic, 2 duplexes and a house. Those top 2 duplexes on the west side are going to be demolished. Though these lots probably won't be completely unusable. So VDOT will sell them off or give them to the city or something. Maybe we could build affordable housing. So if we just kind of scooch the RA up 2 lots on the west side to cover these 2 duplexes that won't be demolished,
Right,
and 3 lots on the east side.
right.
We leave these 2 on the west side, the one fronting hydraulic on the east side, which again, egress is going to be hard, but maybe if it were combined with this big office building, you could build something new there that's together. And then
What about Swanson?
Swanson.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, on the
back.
other side.
It's got the same sort of issue.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you're actually, I mean, that's sort of what I was proposing. was
Go back to
Swanson.
your roundabout thing.
Yeah, it's kind of off here. Right. So I guess it would be these buildings. But on Swanson, we have a commercial use fronting hydraulic, a small apartment building behind that, then a 4-plex and a single family big use on the one side. And then multifamily house, duplex house. Well, actually, I think that one probably is in there.
Right, well, we only may be talking about 1 or 2 lots on each side of Swanson at the very, to the scooch, as you were saying.
Yeah, basically pushing
That's
it
a
all
technical
over
planning.
forward
Yeah,
where
that's- that's
there
not-
is
I want
currently.
to leave hydraulic as it is. I don't think there's any point.
I think that's pretty reasonable. And we're talking about like 4 lots that are pretty small.
Any further discussion on the side?
So what would happen to those lots?
Well, they're currently housing. And they would stay currently housing because we switch it to RA.
Okay,
I think what's being proposed makes sense.
I got you.
So would you net that out? Would you net out what you're
So
proposing?
change the lots that are further away that are currently residential, that are at least, so. All right, so here on the west side, these bottom 2. On the east side, these bottom 3, or maybe the bottom 2 maybe even, but I don't know how necessary that is. And then over here, we've got some commercial use in apartments, but there's a couple down there that are low density residential, and you remove those, I guess. Oh, no, remove it from.
And this is an apartment.
So the red dots would go RA.
Right.
Okay, That's your proposal, am I
That's
right?
my proposal.
Okay,
There's approximately, let's say, 7 lots.
okay.
We don't need to,
And they would stay that way even with the roundabout,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Okay.
we don't need a motion on this. Any further discussion? Mr. Stolzenberg, you also emailed me a proposal. Can you share that, please?
Yeah, so mine is number 102. This actually doesn't require a future land use map change. I had a typo there, so it's the Rugby, so 14th south of Grady area that I think the team could not figure out what I was talking about, because I said north of Grady.
So go up to the map.
So down a little bit. Like south. Little north, or pull it, go southwest. Yeah, and then a little west as we're good. Okay, so this is like, the student housing area, locally known as Rugby, not to be confused with all of our other Rugbys. This is kind of that university medium density area that was developed in the 80s. And these are kind of your denser, older student housing areas. And then 14, we had, pretty big upsetting there about 20 years ago. So this is almost entirely populated by students, and designated high density residential in the current map. And that is either RX3 or RX5. And I propose that it be RX5 in the kind of general philosophy of, fitting as many students into existing students areas as we can as they stop spreading out. That would just leave a little bit more room to fit them in. I think 5 is also fairly consistent with, there's some new development along Virginia Avenue, there's 4 stories over there that, is obviously higher than 3. There's a lot along 14th Street that's taller than that. Of course, this is Grandmark, which is a, pretty tall building.
To draw a circle around the entirety of what you say, I want all of this, what?
Effectively, this area,
Okay.
and I have sent an actual circle around that. But basically where the students are now. And then I kind of also, in a different suggestion, proposed a few tweaks for around here to take some owner occupied houses out of the RX3 and move them into the RB that everything else is. And I think over here, maybe there were a few, the borders aren't exactly where, they don't line up exactly with where owner occupied houses versus student houses are in this vicinity. It's like 4 or 5 lots that I would swap, but in general, the concept is more student housing in student housing areas.
Discussion on this issue.
So it would just make it more compact and they couldn't go this way,
Yep. That's
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
We've kind of done that along JPA, but we kind of didn't do it so much in this one.
Okay, so they'd be here, but they couldn't go like that.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Has anybody attempted to give any thought to, I know this is such a hypothetical question, I'm sure nobody has any actual numbers on it, but thinking about what this notion of fitting more students into a student area looks like. For example, to take that particular vicinity, do we know how many students live there now? Do we know if we were to double the number of students, how many more students we're putting in there? I really believe that one of the things that Charlottesville needs to do, first of all, I think it is unlikely personally that UVA is going to actually take all second-year students onto grounds. That's just me trying to read tea leaves. It's not any inside knowledge. And if it happens, it's going to happen probably at least 5 years from now anyway, and maybe more like 10, who knows? By that time, we'll have a different board of visitors. We may have a different president. We don't know. So I think that that's probably, although I would love to see it happen, for some reasons, I don't think it's something that we should be counting on. And I would like to think, okay, if we assume that the university is going to continue to grow at its roughly 1% a year, and that's what they have tended to do, I've been told by leadership over there that they actually do have a plan for growing at about 0.75% a year. That is their expectation. That would work out to roughly a couple hundred students a year. My own experience with the university has been that when they get around to giving admissions decisions, their math is usually off. And so 200 may turn into 250, may turn into 300 a year. But in any event, if we assume we're going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple hundred more students a year, and if we assume that we're doing this zoning plan for the next 20 years to have in mind, then we ought to be thinking about where 4,000 more students are going to go. And they won't all go in the city, and the university may house some of them. But if we figure that we're going to need to house another 2,000 students in any case, half of the expected burden during that time, where would they go? Has anybody thought about what that looks like in terms of either the student heavy neighborhood in the Venable area, or for that matter, for the JPA area?
Who is anyone who has thought?
You mean like quantified?
Just, to say, okay, we've got X number of students there, that helps define the magnitude of the problem. Or to say, we've got so many students in the JPA area, and are we talking about doubling the number of students there? What are we thinking about? And so, although Phil's comment was a little snarky, it's not far wrong, because thought, I am not aware of having heard anybody think out loud, at least, about what this means when we talk about putting more students in the student neighborhoods.
I just have a thought in terms of new construction around Virginia Avenue, the 4-story building, outdoor staircase. To my eye, very attractive. Trees in front. I think that's an interesting model and something that clearly can be done.
Okay, so, sorry, clarification, Mr. Mayor, you're talking about literally what does it look like, which was his response.
Perhaps,
What is the density, how many students are actually there by number, that sort of thing. Yeah, okay.
I think it's experientially, sorry. As Wiles pointed out, they do work on Virginia Avenue, where we've got, I know they happened a while ago, but is it 15th Street? Since I've lived in this town, a bunch of small houses have been torn down in this area, and they've all kind of popped up as larger apartment buildings. I think experientially, what we're imagining is obviously more of that. This area has been kind of a battleground for BAR. I think we've had a couple appeals to council in here. It is a bit of a struggle because there's a lot of existing single-family houses that are no longer single-family houses. To me, it's a little frustrating because you have an elementary school, you have a library, you have nearby parks. It's set up as a neighborhood, but it is almost completely overrun by students. So I think
It's a judgmental word for you.
well, I mean, it's almost,
Infected.
very few, I think we've had, I'm aware of 2 owner-occupied houses south of Grady. I'm sure there are probably more, but when you look on, we've had VAR presentations where people actually point out all of the student rentals is owner-occupied. It is mostly leased, and very few owner-occupied dwellings in that area. At least in south of Grady. So I think we are, if we do this, we're kind of accepting that this neighborhood is going to change. It's not going to be a bunch of single-family houses at some point. But for me, I think, south of Grady makes sense, east of Cabell makes sense. I'm a little concerned about north of Grady and west of Cabell, so where Preston Place is, because that does seem to be more owner occupied still.
Could I ask, excuse me. I think the idea is a great one to make sense. I am very cautious about it for a couple of reasons. And when I get my turn in the draft, I'm gonna ask about this. And it's less about density per se than it is about the road network and just how many. We're assuming a lot of things about vehicles. We're assuming a lot of things about the road network. So where Rugby comes into Preston, just north of there, essentially in an area has been, for better or worse, residential for many, many years. That's going to become essentially like a hub as we're looking at it. I have some real questions about whether that's really feasible, what that would look like. In terms of the suggestion here, would you say, Rory, that kind of the average building in there now is sort of an RX3 in terms of, I mean, I'm not very good yet at like translating, what RX3 would look like in the wild. So to speak.
Yeah, I mean, like Carl said, there are a lot of kind of older single family house type buildings there that have been split up into like an 8-bedroom house, which is technically illegal to have more than 4 in a bedroom or in a house. But anyway,
that's a technicality. We're not going there.
yeah, there are a decent number of taller buildings there. I also probably should have mentioned this whole area is zoned either UMD or UHD now since the 2003 zoning. And that is zoned for 50 feet, 5 stories. So really what we're proposing in this map is a down zoning of that whole area from what we allow there now. And RX5 would be about what's allowed now.
And how many would that be? I mean,
Like stories or?
Yeah, stories and or units, yes.
5 stories.
5 stories,
yeah,
okay.
just kind of control, no
Okay.
specific unit count.
Okay, but not to exceed 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying, Rory, that right now, yeah. Why wasn't this like flagged during the FLUM conversations? Or maybe
Well,
it
because in the
was.
slum, it is high intensity residential, which could be either 3 or 5. And then when we translated it to
I
the
see.
map,
I
we
see.
went with the lower one for whatever reason. And that's why it's kind of coming out now.
Okay.
And these zones are a little bit broken in that they have all these weird requirements that come along with them that make it really hard to do, especially in a small lot. Because you have like a certain amount of open space and amenity space.
The current ones.
Yeah, but the intent in 2003 was to kind of fit more students into those areas. And down on the lower part of 14th, you definitely see a fair amount of development under that, under that zone. So Mayor Smith's point, there are a little over 2,000 students in this area, and roughly 2,000 in the JPA area. And I think what we want to do is to provide the capacity to have a decent amount more. And really we should be outpacing the university's growth in this, right? Because
Well, that's true, yeah.
they're already, students
gotta
are
make
already
it up.
sprawled out in Johnson Village and Fifield and Page. And we want to pull them in, which means we need to get that student housing built faster there. And so if you have more spare capacity, more lots have that kind of opportunity and viability to redevelop. And, if UVA ends up shrinking its enrollment, you still have all that student housing there. That just shrinks all that student footprint a little faster than you were going to do. You don't immediately jump to the full build out until there's like actual market demand for it. So.
Well, and I think we also have to keep in mind what I understand. I wasn't part of the decision-making at the time, but what the later population data suggests is that when in 2013, 2014, we built those apartment complexes, or we allowed folks to build the apartment complexes on West Main, that freed up a lot of housing in the immediate neighborhood, 10th and Page, Fifeville. And suddenly, the way we know this is because the school enrollment, the public school enrollment jumped by 250 or 300 in like 1 year, which caused everybody to then extrapolate that was going to continue ad infinitum, when in fact it was just a one-time blip. But the point being that we know that it happens, that when you build more apartments that students are likely to want to live in, they are likely to choose to live in those. And so it may well be that by doing so, we are able to minimize the sort of the sprawl, as we would say. And that would be positive in any event.
And to just add to that, we often talk about pulling kids out of the historically non-student neighborhoods. But I think it also applies to pulling students out of these single-family houses in those student areas. So like,
Yeah.
you know, we build this apartment building on JPA, and certainly the construction is going to be disruptive, but then suddenly, you know, there are a whole lot more apartments there, which means, you know, students aren't necessarily filling, you know, every single house along Washington Ave next to 2005 JPA is currently students. You know, one of those landlords, a guy who lives in Erie, Pennsylvania, and was suing the city, now has listed his duplex on the market because probably the prospects for future rent are not as strong as they were. Now you have all this competition across the street, which opens it up to potentially be bought by, you know, a non-student homeowner. Now that, because the students are not only shrinking geographically into these neighborhoods, but also into those purpose-built student rentals, allowing even some of those to be reclaimed by, you know, UVA faculty or whatever.
So, Mr. Palmer, you've been unreasonably kind and patient. Share your thoughts on this item.
I mean, I think in that area, it's reasonable to go up to the RX5 for the reasons you stated. You know, generally what we've found in surveying students is for undergraduates, especially, they just want to be as close as they can to UVA. No shock there. I will say this area and JPA are both well served by our UTS transit and very walkable. So, you know, you could exist there without a car, though we know from walking or driving through there that there are a lot of students with cars there. So I think you build more, and if there's no parking minimums, we're going to have to manage that with maybe more, like some of the roads have like parking decals from the city, some don't. There may be more of that going on in the future. I'll lose my free parking. Yeah, so. But I think that makes sense. I do agree. Whoever mentioned Preston Place, that was one area that kind of gives me pause because those are really kind of historic, nice single family homes. That I get the feeling they're going to remain that way as long as they can. So.
Any discussion on the side?
I think that makes sense. Fired on.
I was with you, but then the single family homes that are in this direction would still be protected with your.
Which direction? Like outside of the student area? or-
Yeah, like, yes, going more toward Grady, because you know, you've got some single family homes in there.
Oh,
Some of them are owner occupied, but I know some of them are single family, but they're rented. But I'm talking about the owner occupied ones.
You mean like east of 14th Street, like closer downtown?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's all cut out.
Okay,
So this is, this is Venable Elementary.
Mhm.
So even with that, on that side of the block,
Yep.
and north of Venable
Yep, yep,
Elementary,
yep.
that's all out of there. That's part of
Okay.
the tentative page.
Okay.
It's Venable, but it should be
Okay.
on the page.
okay, so now going towards Preston. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that whole like 4 block area
Uh-huh,
on Grady, closer to
Yeah.
Preston is not in this.
okay, got you. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess if the point is that what's there now essentially is RX5, and there was some weirdness in the translation from the FLUM to the zoning map. Okay, if we feel like that's a credible, reasonable, fair statement to make, then I could support RX5.
My personal view is it seems reasonable. Anything else on this side? Mr. Mitchell, can you please give us a draft a request?
What are you asking me to do?
We have 31 items remaining. Do any of them?
Gotcha, okay. Oh, the draft thing. I think we talked about just about everything I wanted to talk about in the first meeting. The big deal for me was right scrapyard, and I think we landed the plane on that we would move from residential to urban center, residential center to urban center, so that we could accommodate light industrial, commercial, and housing. And that was my biggest thing, but we landed that. a couple weeks here. I'm sorry, what was the issue and where did we land it? This is Wrights, right across from Beer Behind, Scrapyard. And the current thinking is to make it a commercial, residential center. And my argument was that we need more area in the city for light industrial. We need another, that's a great ideal place for more commercial. And we can also do some mixed use and build some residential in there. So my argument was to make that more like the downtown mall, which is designated urban center.
Currently,
No, it's not currently. I'm not sure what it's currently designated, but
M1.
currently is with the zone, I didn't know there was.
the current plan
Bring 'em on.
is to make it a residential center. And my objective is to make it more urban centered so that we can get, again, light industry, commercial and residential in there.
So what was
The
the,
land use map, right, so the land use maps, that was neighborhood center.
Right, it was,
Which was more similar to a Belmont scale center. And so the proposal last time we talked was to characterize it more as an urban center, more of an extension of.
so what would
the development would just be.
the numbers be, the tag?
It's
I
at
thought
NX5.
These NX five, I think what we ended on was a gradation of the highest intensity closest to the railroad. I think taking it up to NX8 and then stepping down as you approach.
Calhoun.
What's that?
Calhoun,
Sorry.
stepping
No.
it down as you get closer to Calhoun.
That's not near Calhoun.
Sorry.
Mr. Hall.
Yes,
Me
looking at the,
This is Calhoun right here.
two, I have, will this come around or is this the one say I get?
I hope he comes around again.
Okay, I'll start with these, they're both in the same category, but I'll start with number 99. Look at 99 and 26, and they're the church properties. Basically, 99 being Mount Zion Baptist. Right now, it's what it currently needs.
RS and B1.
R1.
RS, S1 and B1.
Yes. And I think the South First Street development across the street is RX3. To me, makes sense to make it RX3. It's right on Elliott. It's this property right here. This is South First Street. Sarah J. Zion Church. And it's RA right now. And I don't know if they have any plans to do anything with it, but why not give them the option to, if they wanted to put housing there.
And there you're talking about is the church.
The land next to the
What
church.
church is this?
Like the parking lot, Mount Zion.
Mount Zion.
Parking lot down there, yeah.
And repeat that again. Say that one more time, what you just said. The lot next to Mount Zion, you're saying.
The lot of their lots.
The parking lots.
The
and stuff,
parking
yeah.
lot is to increase it from R8 to RX3 to match the other side of the street in case they wanted to have a project in the future or whatever they want to do with that lot, they have the opportunity to do so. If they wanted to add housing or whatever.
Like the proposals that have come before us recently.
Yes,
Some of the
exactly.
other
Yes,
Match.
churches.
backyard, they
Yeah.
call
That's cool.
I'm just gonna, I'm gonna note in this one, conceptually, I don't disagree. What I'm gonna note is this is one that would, unlike the last one we were just talking about, this one would require us to come back, as I understand, come back and make an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And I just generally want to put on the table that I do have a little bit of concern about what complications that brings into our process as we move forward. It's not impossible, but it creates another step in our process as we move through adoption.
I think we should just keep a list of all those things that we're gonna do that. And once we've gotten this thing to council, we come back and then do the amendments.
So can you explain kind of what complication that adds?
It's a separate public hearing. It's just a separate parallel process that we would have to go through. That's all.
Okay.
Let's keep it simple.
I mean, public hearing doesn't seem too onerous.
I'm just saying there's advertising that comes with that. There's a whole lot of things that come with that. So it's very easy to to, I'll say it again, we can take what's on the map and go down from there in intensity, right? We can take an area that's designated as RC and make it RB, right? Because that's still consistent, as I understand the process, it is still consistent with the comprehensive plan because it's less intense than what the comprehensive plan shows. But if we go the other way and we make it more intense than what the comprehensive plan shows, then we're on stronger footing if we then go in and make an amendment to the comprehensive plan as well.
So,
And acknowledging, Rory, it's not impossible. I'm just saying it is introducing another layer of complexity because it's a parallel process that we would have to carry simultaneously through planning commission and council.
but if you did what Mr. Mitchell suggested,
That's easy.
we wouldn't have to go through all of that. So, Mr. Mitchell, make sure that they hear what you suggested, okay?
I think Mr. Freeze gets it.
Mr. Mitchell, make sure that they hear what you just suggested, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Suggestion was just pin it for later.
Yeah, let's make a list of all the things that are gonna be upgraded. I mean, downgraded and yeah, get through this and then, then make a recommendation for the downgrades.
The other point, just along the same theme, was 26.
But let's do one per please.
Okay.
On this item, any further discussion, that's all right. Personally, I support it, but I don't think it's a
26 is kind of the same thing, generally churches.
This is the North
Like
First
Council
Baptist on Park Street. And
pushing it, but all right, I'll accept that.
Let him
I'm
keep
sorry.
going, he's talking about
um,
churches, keep moving.
It's the First Baptist Church on Park Street. It's right now RA. They have a huge property with a giant parking lot. I feel like it makes sense to up that a little bit as well for if they wanted to do something in the future, kind of like what we've seen. And the other church that was listed here was the Transfiguration Greek Orthodox Church, which is at McIntyre. It's at that corner. And I think right now it's medium intensity.
And that's R3.
Discussion on the status.
So at Mount Zion, you're wanting to increase that density as well, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it just gives them the option to, they don't have to do anything with
What
it.
is, the map currently says,
Right now it's RA, which is single time, what used to be like 3 units, I guess.
are you saying something like RX3?
Yeah, and then that one, it would make sense to be RX3 to match the other side of the road.
And this thing at First Baptist?
First Baptist on Park Street. Which is,
Like, I understand where it is, but you're saying RX3 for that one as well?
not sure what I'm saying exactly. But more than RA, because it's just.
Like
so-
RC
such a
maybe?
huge property.
And it goes on that list that Mr. Mitchell was talking about. All 3 of your churches go on his list. We got it. There you go.
Any more discussion on extended matter?
Y'all gotta keep.
Way to sneak that in there. Good job.
I agree, that seems reasonable in our connected.
They're all connected.
Ms. Schwartz. Please.
Uh-oh. Here he goes.
Mine are also land use map adjustments. Yeah, I'll go quickly with it. The city yard, sorry, I can't find it. I don't know why. I don't know who wrote this, but it does, that's my memory of it, is the Star Hill Small Area Plan is supposed to be a mixed use development in city yard. I know this isn't pressing because we're not getting rid of city yard at the moment, but it is it does seem like it needs to be an adjustment to the future land use map. So I think it's called for high intensity residential, which would imply not commercial.
For the discussion on city yard.
Yeah.
We're the city in the position to move forward on that one. And I don't know a time frame for that, but were that to happen, it's a relatively simple matter for the city to pursue a comp plan amendment or rezoning.
Sorry, I'm obviously not super prepared.
Any further discussion on the side? I agree, sensible, but not time sensitive. Mr. Pollard, is there anything?
No, I don't have anything to raise. I think the campus zones make sense. I did have one question, like, what if, say the university were to acquire a property in the city that's got a, I mean, it would already have a zoning, would there be a process to fold it into the campus rezoning, or would it just be kind of a moot point, or like how it?
It's kind of a good point. You guys are exempt.
Yeah,
You can do whatever you want to do anyway, so.
Right, but I mean.
I just didn't know if there was any, because, previously,
City
we didn't,
University in particular.
yeah, previously we didn't have that like specific campus designation, so.
Right.
I just,
I will say, one of the things that we're talking about is an annual cleanup action, right? We know that any zoning ordinance, if we can go into the one we have today, there are little cleanup actions that have never been addressed. Annually, we want to take things that we've identified over the course of the year and say, yeah, this needs to be cleaned up. Typo, 2 conflicting sections, whatever it be, and that would be a perfect opportunity where if the university has been on a buying spree, we can address that as well.
not saying we're planning. Question, hypothetical question,
Hypothetical question.
thanks.
I will skip my turn for now. Mr. Peterson, you ready for that tonight?
Yeah, I'm not sure which tab this is on, so if I'm in the wrong spot, tell me I can talk later or some other time. And maybe this has been discussed at length in other places, but I'd be interested now in having a quick conversation. So the Meadowbrook 250 Walker CHS, I'm talking separate from the zoning around the high school. I'm talking
Bid number 18.
I guess, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not clever enough to find that right now. Over to the left, please.
Currently designated RB and an RC.
There's something like this area, or like this is Walker.
Yeah, the bridge there.
The RC area is what number 18 is talking about.
Okay. Well, there's also another item that if I need to search it, if you need to know the number, I can find it.
I'm at number 46.
There's another one specifically about the Walker side of the road, and there's like 4 or 5 roads that come in together, Dairy and
That might be.
up right at, nope,
Not this area.
no, the top, I think. I think so. I think, and they mentioned Dairy.
Dairy and Gentry and all that.
Oh, that's maybe down here.
Are you talking about going over the bridge?
I thought what they were referring to is right there at the intersection, the north part of Walker, where you have all of that going on and then the bridge going across. I guess, have the conversations happened at an earlier state or stage? How do people feel that intersection is going to work with, specifically in terms of traffic and just the practicalities of students getting through there? Even if the logic, the zoning map logic is correct in terms of where you've got RB and RC, practically speaking, do we think that makes sense? If someone were to come and add an RC level development at those 3 lots, or one of those lots for that matter, what's going to happen to that node?
I would think generally, RC lives in 8 units, right? So an 8 unit development isn't gonna have much appreciable impact on this road that has,
It's going to have
in the range of mid thousands of cars per day.
It's going to have an impact on that intersection for sure.
I mean, you'd probably be I don't have ITE tables memorized, but maybe a couple trips an hour at peak? Does that seem right?
Where?
Coming out of an 8 unit development. I'd also add, it's kind of a little bit tangential, but like this here is one of those really good bike facilities I've mentioned gets you, except for a short stint on sidewalk, which you're technically not allowed to do in hydraulic, all the way to Seminole Square. And then over here, you come through CHS, you're going through McIntyre Park and down the Greenway, pretty much all the way to downtown. It's one of those very few areas where you can be on a totally low stress bike path to get to all these useful places, jobs and stores, for almost the entire stretch. Not a ton of those with that good infrastructure in the city.
Additional discussion on that?
I just, with the reference to Tori's mentioned the IT, right, that's how each project has come in, and that's how it's assessed as part of the site plan review process, is to understand what are the potential traffic impacts. And
So would you countenance, or could you expect the site plan review group at some point to countenance, if someone were to make these pencil, which is unlikely, I understand, 3 RC developments at that point? I mean, does that even make sense?
So
even if all 3 of them came on board, and we're able to maximize in that location. And this is where one of the challenges of kind of looking at this is that zoning is just one piece
I
of
understand.
everything that has to be accomplished in order for a development to they happen.
Right.
So we don't know what exactly the site constraints themselves are that are on that site. And as part of the site plan review, we'd also be looking at where the entrance is located and all those types of things in order to make sure that we're optimizing how traffic and people and all the different modes they're gonna have to interact in that space are working through that space. The number of units doesn't really rise to the level of creating concern at this location. It's more, how do we, the bigger issue, if this were to happen, is we would be looking at how do we design the site and the site access and entrances to ensure that we're not creating an issue. That's where we would.
I hear
have a
you,
decision.
but if you're, the average person who's trying to get in and out of CHS through that, or Walker for that matter, to tell someone that the number of units isn't going to impact that. I guess theoretically, I can make sense of what you're saying. And I also can appreciate that when you get down to the site plan development, that's when the, brass tacks discussions happen. And so maybe this is all just, theoretical, but a person that comes through that intersection every day, particularly with all the students that are there.
Can I add that also speaks to our larger efforts in transportation planning generally. And generously, we talked about this as a 20-year plan, 20-year zoning ordinance, but the reality is this is probably even more than that in terms of time frame for when stuff actually happens, right? Because we're building a body of regulation. This isn't a building plan. It isn't saying things are going to happen right now. But when we think about our overall transportation planning efforts, I think one of the areas we should be thinking about is, and we do think about, right? We have a whole section focused on safe routes to school because we want to move people out of private automobiles, going to our schools and into alternative modes. So, and probably it's overdue right now in terms of what's happening out there. What are we doing to actually shift the modes of transportation towards how people get to school, elementary school, or even particularly the high school? So, I mean, thinking about the other side of that equation and saying, do we have to live with a condition where there's bad traffic around the high school at the start of school day every day? Or is that something we should be looking to address?
Yeah, I certainly think we should be looking to address it. And I also understand that this is creating a sort of envelope for the future. It's not prescriptive. But if our envelope is basically saying that, hey, we could have 3 units here of the size that have been mentioned right around this node, which is, again, if people coming across 250, it's people getting into CHS, it's folks getting into Walker, and have similar concerns, and I'm using too much of my time, similar concerns at the Rugby Road, Rugby Ave, all of that. I mean, that is an incredibly narrow street. So I guess, I know that you've already been doing this, James, in terms of like laying out our infrastructure plan and but somehow we're gonna have to, and this goes to parking as well, really along with this effort, we need to make sure we've begun talking about what a parking system looks like, what our concrete plans are for these kinds of things, because it's upsetting to people, and I understand why they would be upset driving through there every day. It's like, really, you're gonna add more to the space? So I'll stop now.
Any further discussion on the site?
And so I just looked at the numbers. So by the traffic engineer trip generation tables, which are, I won't comment on that, but it's for 24 units, it would be at the PM peak hour, about 13 trips for that whole hour. So about one every 4 minutes or so, 4 or 5 minutes. And about 2/3 of those would be entering the site, which is usually not so bad for traffic. That, I guess I'd say, these are pretty big lots, like 130 to 150 feet wide. So you'd think you'd put this would be a site plan thing, but you put the entrance and exit far from the intersection. So it's, mid-block and not as disruptive to the intersection. It seems like that would be pretty feasible. So.
Any additional discussion on this item? Ms. Spurrier, you draft an item. Thank you very much. You're welcome. There's none. You have an item to draft.
But to sort of follow on the last discussion, I've been concerned about, and it turns out about 5 different numbers in the spreadsheet, number 18, 46, 64, 71, and 141, all bear on, to some degree, this intersection or the area between Grove and Kenwood Lane on Meadowbrook Heights Road. And the particular thing that strikes me about it is that we're proposing, this proposes RB up to Kenwood and one lot beyond Kenwood. In other words, the other side of Kenwood, going through the pinch point that is, to me, one of the primary reasons why I really don't want to increase density right there unless we're going to solve the traffic problem. And that gets back to the question that I've been asking for a year now, which is, what responsibility do we have if we create a greater degree of intensity of use there? What responsibility do we have to fix the traffic problem ourselves? We can't require the developer to fix it. We can't require the neighbors to fix the problem. The only way we're really going to be able to solve that problem there, I suspect, is to buy up at least one of those houses and straighten the road and run it through what is now somebody's driveway and so on. And so we get back to the fact that I'm not averse to increased density along there. And certainly it is possible in an awful lot of that area to widen the road. In some cases, there's only sidewalk on one side, if that, not at all through the pinch point. So we would be making some improvements, but they would be improvements at city expense, which could be rather expensive. I mean, we're talking, it could be a $1 million sidewalk through that one block, because we'd have to buy up at least one, probably $600,000 house in order to make it happen. So that gets back to this question of, what obligation do we have now to sort of go on record as saying, we want more density there and we are willing to pay the price. Related to that is my overall issue, which I think would be a good issue for that block of Meadowbrook Heights Road. I don't think that we really want to have an entire block of even RB apartments along there. But I do think there ought to be some way to have some RB apartments in there. It doesn't offend me to have some. I think the neighbors are absolutely right when they say, number one, I mean, it just changes the character of the neighborhood, but number two, it changes it changes the street, it changes the traffic and the sidewalks and all of those other issues. And I, you know, when the folks who are saying, oh, go slow, go slow, go slow, you haven't figured out the infrastructure implications for a lot of this. And I think that criticism is true for certain pieces, for certain areas where we can look at them and say, you know, there is going to be an infrastructure problem there. I'm not concerned citywide. I think citywide, the city infrastructure is probably in pretty good shape to handle most of what we're going to throw at it. But there are going to be some problems that I don't know. And that's a one problem area that if we're really going to be serious about that, we have to also be serious about how are we going to confront it.
Discussion on that?
So I think, leaving aside the general and several others that you know, on sort of higher levels, etc. I think that this spot, and I'm not, as you know, I'm not generally somebody who leans on traffic first, but in that spot, Kenwood and Meadowbrook Heights Road, that is literally a pinch point.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like it's, you know, it's even uncharacteristic for the neighborhood. It is a very tiny intersection in every sense. And I think, I don't know to what extent this will alleviate it, to take the 4 lots around the corner and take them out of our D, just so there's nothing else. You're not having RV traffic up at that is pointing down towards the bypass, but you know, I mean, in that, I think I'd agree with you, but that is an instance where we really need to look at that transportation infrastructure first, because that is, I mean, it's paved.
But also, that's a spot where the defining characteristic is the narrow street, the
Right.
too narrow street.
Exactly, yeah.
And until we deal with that, or until we affirmatively decide we're not going to deal with it, which is kind of what we've done since we annexed that place like 65 years ago. You know, we need to make some affirmative decision and not just continue to have it be the accident.
It's very narrow.
I'm sorry, can you say again exactly what you're talking about?
Well, particularly the intersection of Kenwood and Meadowbrook Heights Road,
Yeah.
where that pinch point going north from there takes it between 2 driveways,
Yep.
one on either side. And there's a telephone pole right smack in the middle there.
Yep.
And
Any retaining wall.
retaining walls and all kinds of other things.
It's an accident waiting to happen that hasn't happened yet.
In some cases it has.
Oh,
Yes, it has.
not since I've been traveling that route.
So do you mean kind of taking those 4 lots at the corner out or?
That's Phil's
That's
suggestion.
my suggestion. Take those 4 out, so at least what we're doing is moving the higher density traffic is not going to be originating from these 4, and you're gonna be driving down, because really, there isn't, I mean, what's up here? I mean, I guess eventually you get to, yeah, you wanna,
Well, the reality is most folks in that area cut over on King Mountain or Essex to get to Brandywine, because it turns out it's about 2/10 of a mile shorter than going around the loop-de-loop of Yorktown. As one who's lived in that neighborhood for almost 40 years.
There's no reason for traffic going up this way. That's all we're doing.
Wait a minute, say that again. If you do what?
Take these 4.
Yeah,
At the intersection,
yes,
then the RV traffic
yes.
doesn't really interact with this. They're not gonna be turning left onto Kenwood. And, or particularly right onto Kenwood, they're gonna be moving down Meadowbrook Heights Road in general, because if
Okay.
you live here, there's nothing up here unless you're losing a friend.
Uh-huh.
Unless you want to get to Royal Road.
Which you do by going up to, well, yeah, I guess that's.
Mm, mm.
You still have, you know. I mean, I think that site specific to that intersection is trouble.
Hmm.
Mr. Priest, do you want to address the structure issues?
Feel like it,
Done already? No? Any further discussion on the site?
So, I mean, I think the 2 on the top is after Kenwood gets narrow, and that makes sense. The 2 on the bottom seem to be where it's still not super narrow and they're pretty wide, so you could get an entrance pretty far from the intersection. So I don't quite see how big of a problem it is, but I mean, I don't really have strong opinions. You can take off. If you think that will help.
Drive over there, check it out.
Right, bike, even better.
Quite a hill.
You don't get the full impact.
Mr. Mitchell, take a chance now.
Second draft pick.
What do you want? Oh, I see. Mr. Avali.
I'll say something, please. There are a few comments that are about projects that are in the works or around that theme. And I guess I'll choose one to start, which is number 6, the UVACM to CX5, which is on Portland.
Staff said they were gonna fix that.
Okay, well,
Is that true?
so
The Portland student housing or the affordable housing project DVA is doing?
I'm aware of that one.
Of that.
No problem. Guess we should.
I did see that in the list. It's on Stacy Hall, so it's West Main. and
I see number 6, Fenton Woodland.
yes.
But what sheet are, I am so confused as to what spreadsheet, what sheet.
This one.
So all of them are sheet one.
Yeah, she was the easiest one.
Okay.
He's already told you all he's having a little issue today. Bear with them, be nice.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's the back part of that parcel, yeah. So what's the maroon zoning on
This
that?
is CM and this is CX5.
So, I mean, CM essentially is 5-story. So I'm not sure there's,
Isn't it 5 stars with a really weird setback situation?
yeah, maybe the
Because you have two
setbacks.
different also zoning, whatever project happens there in the future will have to meet either, like, that line will have to switch to the different zoning
Yeah,
rules, which have different setbacks and all that kind of stuff. So just.
unless they
makes it
apply
easier to
for,
make them
unless
all-
they apply for like a rezoning.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the church situation. Although I guess it's a little more immediate.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess what I'm saying, I wouldn't bat an eye if you changed it, if it was changed, from the university's perspective. If that makes it cleaner.
I can't see the lot line one.
Yeah, there's,
They almost line
that's
up
one
with
where
the-
we've looked at it where the project line and the lot lines do not match. And so it needs some clarification
What's
of
gonna
of
happen?
what the project's actually gonna be in order to determine where the zoning line would
Right.
make sense.
Because what's gonna happen is that big CM lot is gonna get cut and not in half, but the back part will
So I think there's a bunch of
be,
actions that we need to happen.
Yeah.
simultaneously with this, to prepare for that development site, and I think we can roll the rezoning into that
right,
process. or the university.
because right now you'd be doing a split zoning on the parcel.
isn't it, and that kind of is adding like extra complexity and difficulty for whoever they award the RFP to do it, right? Whereas if we just made it all CX5, I mean, for the Stacy Hall part of it, you guys don't have to adhere to the zoning anyway, so you can do whatever you want. And that solves the problem for whatever.
I'm not,
last-
I'm not sure that that's, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I don't like that
assume
idea.
That's absolutely true, given the fact that it's on the university use on the property.
Stacy Hall?
No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, and I know what you're
the-
saying,
the Residential,
yeah.
that's the part we care about.
Yeah, that's the part that's gonna matter, and so we should make it whatever matters for that, which I think is yes.
Well, my recommendation to the university, before they turn the property over to take care of those types of administrative steps that we need to take.
The line isn't clear, like they don't have a line, like a lot line figured
Yeah,
out
But if
yet.
it's all CX5,
Yeah.
then it would-
We have a rough idea of where that lot line.
If they
But
want,
that's
that
gonna
way,
have-
if we change to our CX5 now, then they can get the part that they keep rezoned to campus later, I guess is what I'm saying. And that way it's a process that doesn't block the affordable
In
housing
that
stuff.
annual cleanup. I mean,
Yeah. you gotta
I feel like
get
it
away.
doesn't, yeah, that obviously wouldn't be a problem. I think the nice thing about this is it's like recognizable that that's UVA. Already
Yeah.
there, but then that would go away for, however long that cleanup takes.
Further thoughts on this item? Thank you, Rosie.
Okay, so this one actually is, it's another future land use map, issue, but, I forget what number it is, it's like 60 something there in here. Around Lexington and, Locust and that area. I am still confused as to why, okay, I guess if you could zoom in, you can Park Street and, Locust. Yeah, that's good enough. So I'm confused as to why we're extending higher density residential up Lexington. Oh, thank you. Who's pointing at it right now?
Just-
I am. You are. Wait, there's one button, one tick up. Oh, cool, thank you. Yes, I'm a little confused as to why we're seeing higher density residential up Lexington Avenue. And it doesn't go anywhere. It just seemed very curious. It just seemed like it was, we need to spread density throughout all the neighborhoods, so let's just put it here. Whereas Locust is actually a throughput. And then when you get north of the 250 bypass, you've got higher density north of it. And just the connections here, it doesn't make any sense to see that. Similar to Park Street, where we've broken the density so that we don't have it south of the bypass, but the north of the bypass, it is up north of there. Yeah, I would done as far as, putting density where there's, transportation networks, where can be, and I Lexington again doesn't seem like the street doesn't seem appropriate.
And it's fully built out everywhere, isn't it?
Well, they're kind of large downward sloping backyards, especially on the east side, that have been seeing a lot of additions lately. And I'll say, I originally thought, kind of agree with you on this, back when we were talking about Plum, but lately I've been, traveling by scooter on those two streets quite a bit. And Locust is kind of awful to bike or even walk on. Whereas Lexington is a pretty adequately wide street with decently low enough traffic and a complete sidewalk network except for right around that little bend on the inside. To the point where, I think if I were someone who wanted to live in an apartment up there and commute to downtown, it's actually quite a bit easier to do that via non-car means on Lexington than on Locust. Which is not to say that, the Locust notion is wrong so much as I was originally more skeptical about the Lexington appropriateness of it. But now I'm fairly convinced that it is a very appropriate place for it. I think you could remove it kind of around the top of the bend. If that's a concern, like visibility or as you make the turn. And I actually have a map, but that's sent out here, but for the rest of it, I think it seems like a very decent place for it if you want it.
Well, what about just connecting the dots between, I don't understand why we put a break between the density and Park Street. Can we pan up just a little bit so I can see what? Is Patrick?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seemed kind of funny to me as these little sections seem a little lost. And it is a land use map adjustment, so maybe it's not even worth discussing the point, at the point, but it can seem curious to me.
So you propose
I would propose
highlighting.
connecting on Park Street and
Locust.
yeah, but it sounds like.
The practicality of what happens if that gets changed, I'm not sure it happens.
Further discussion on that? Please.
I think you consider those as two separate things, right? Like if you're saying, why don't they connect? That's one thing, and is Lexington appropriate is another thing. And I don't have any argument against your point on the other one. Maybe it should.
I feel like it is odd that Lexington goes up by, I mean, what is the zoning map logic for that? Was it like it's supposed to be connected to a certain type of street or?
As the land use map at one point had it, Lexington connecting from Park all the way through to Park. And it was walked back for a similar reason, actually, as we were just talking about on Kenwood, because there's a distinct pinch point in the roadway. And so it was walked back. At one point, there was conversation about reconnecting at Lyons, but via Lyons, I think, or something up that way. But in any event, it was just walked back to that point. And I apologize, right now, I cannot remember. I remember having a conversation with the team and the drafting of the FLUM around why there was a break at Park and why Lucas wasn't the street that went through. And for the life of me, I can't dredge it up again.
I have a very vague
This was
recollection.
like a year and a half ago.
A year and a half ago, I think I was told there was a historic district conflict there. And I wanted to be cautious of that. I think
That
I mean,
sounds,
this is
that
historic
sounds
district
similar.
conflicts, Park Street as well.
But there are already multiple residential uses, Coleman Hall and things like that along that part of Park Street. Whereas that's not really true for the lower part of Locust. More of an adaptation to what's there.
It was curious to me, but I don't want to take any more time because if it sounds like it's not hitting with anyone else. So
My personal view, I think it makes more sense on those, more significant corridors. For what I know, that's the team.
Well, I'll just say that going back to the discussion from a couple of years ago, which still has some resonance, if you go from Evergreen and then you turn left and then you go up and around the curve, and then you come down onto Lexington, it's up around the curve where you get more of the problem with trying to figure out why it would be a benefit to have more apartments all the way back there. I kind of get the idea that maybe from the curve south on Lexington, it would be, for many of the reasons that Rory mentioned, a very good spot for some degree of additional density. Around the curve, the main thing that strikes me is how narrow that road is. And that's another one of those places where I say, if we're going to increase density there, we, the city, need to be prepared to do something about that.
So one thing on Locust is that the sidewalk does kind of cut off on the west side, about halfway up. That might have been part of why. I don't know, you guys probably can't see this right now, but I do think it might make some sense to, on Lexington at the curve, oh, I messed up. So I think there might be value in developing the inside part of the curve, because that's the part missing sidewalks. And you obviously have to complete the sidewalk in front of your thing when you're redeveloping it. And there might be an opportunity for an alley sort of in there. It almost connects now. That would let people kind of traverse it without going through the curve. But then the outside of the curve is where I could see there'd be problems with, traffic trying to enter while people are kind of speeding out around, which I assume they do. And so, I think there might be some value in removing these 10 lots around the outside, which I can send out to you guys. These are my module 2 notes I never sent. It's also not module 2 things, so. I mean, I do feel like the road is wider than you think, though, and has a decent sidewalk network. It's a pretty decent road. And then, yeah, once you get past onto like, you know, Park Lane and Evergreen, that's where it gets real narrow and bad.
This just doesn't seem to go anywhere. And I will say, when I walk down Locust, I walk down Lexington, I'll walk in the middle of the street on Lexington. I'm always in the sidewalk of Locust. And that might have a lot to do with the traffic, but also I think the sidewalk is, I know it's continuous on Lexington, it's really narrow, which is why I feel like I'm usually in the street because I'm avoiding people's landscaping. I don't think it just, and I guess with the historic district that may have put a part of Locust, but I will say the lots are significantly larger on Locust. It could probably handle quite a bit of backyard development. But, yeah. Kind of beating a dead horse.
Further discussion on this dead horse. Mr. Stolzenberg, a horse, please.
Sure.
Like you did for words.
Here's kind of minor one, but really important. Patrick, can you zoom all the way out? Oh, here we go. Okay, so we are getting rid of PUDs, obviously, but we have a few that we already have. One is, oh, you turned it to a smiley face or something. Sure. Stay centered on everything. I'm pointing at everything here. We've got Huntley Hall over there. It's like I don't know, 8, 10 something units in the historic house.
Let you know that they will be, all PUDs will be able to continue to build under their, I've got this
Vested
absolutely
rights,
confirmed.
sure.
That those are vested rights. They build under their, they build under their PUD rules as they exist today.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. They could do that. But you know, I think it also makes sense to maintain a zoning that is relatively in accord with what they would be. The other, I mean, the big one, there's like Amherst Commons, common area should probably be green over there. That doesn't really matter. You guys probably remember a few months ago, Lachlan Hill came to us and said, hey, can we build a bunch of single family houses here where we said in the PUD that we would be building you know, apartments. And we said, no, to comply with this PUD, they have to be apartments. And now we are turning it into RA, basically saying, actually, we do want you to build single family houses, which is the opposite of what we said, kind of undermines the like mix of uses part of a PUD. It gives them an out to just do single family houses like they want. So, you know, I propose making that last block of Lachlan Hill high intensity and then the others just matching what they are already.
They are coming forward with an apartment.
Okay, that's good.
Additional discussion on this?
Maybe it'll, yeah, we'll used to it.
Okay, good. Mr. Plummer, that's raising that. I would like to raise one. Number 34, Barracks Grove Shopping Center area. This is a very substantial part of the city. There's excellent transit access. Quite a few students there, quite a bit of shopping, things to do. Currently, that is marked as NX5, 5 stories. There was a request to make it NX8. Am I correct on this? Zone?
Last time.
Well, that's what I'm.
We already did this one, we already did this one, I'm sorry. We already did this, excuse me, I'm forgetting the past. In that case, we did a good job. Mr. Pigston, do you have a horse story?
I'll take a skip.
Very good. Ms. Spurrier, a horse.
Yes.
There's no. You have it.
Well, I am told that there will be a further discussion of this next time, but to sort of tee it up a little bit, one of my concerns about the RA and RB designations and RC in particular is the commercial uses that are permitted. And one of our strategies seems to have been to to have more RB and RC uses near schools. I was struck recently by and just sort of driving around at the proliferation of vape shops and smoke shops and CBD dispensaries and so on. And I'm wondering why it is that we would want to enable those sorts of uses in our neighborhoods and particularly near our schools. And my broad thought is that I don't think we should allow a commercial use in an RA lot. And that maybe we want to scale back the commercial uses permissible in RB. And RC, which would allow by right with use restrictions over 4,000 square feet of retail space. I just don't understand, and maybe I don't understand the way it is being conceived of these commercial uses as being consistent with a residential scheme. But it is particularly in areas adjacent to schools, which are particularly the areas where we have wanted to increase the amount of housing and more nearly affordable housing. I want to understand what we're doing and perhaps figure out a way to not do some of the worst kinds of things that I can see happening.
I'm interested in that question as well.
I'm also interested.
Well, so first off, the over 4,000 feet, we were told was a typo. That shouldn't be in there. It should be only under 4,000 feet.
So why is that line even on? Okay.
It's in other districts. It's.
Okay, I got you. All right. Well, that's at least somewhat reassuring. Thank you.
With all the discussion about vape shops lately, and there's been a lot, it seems to be the boogeyman for commercial uses, where everyone wants to think of nice cafes and corner stores. I almost wonder if we should break vape shops or tobacco-oriented retail into a separate category and ban those.
Or that's what.
Or regulate them.
Or regulation, that's what the use standard, that's what that idea of subject to use standards can mean, right? It can mean anything from further dimensional restrictions, right? Like the under 4,000 square feet, but it can also mean excluding these particular set of uses. So with greater specificity, we can pull out uses that we see as not being appropriate in that space.
So have in any of the modules we've gotten so far, have use standards been proposed?
Sort of.
That's what I thought, sort
We
of.
have some.
Yeah, so and some of them are, I noted that some of them are, I don't want to say problematic, but for example, in RA, we have discussions about two things, and as far as I know, there are only two businesses, which are, and I guess I would make the argument at some other sessions, this isn't supposed to be talking about in depth here, but eliminating both these provisions about the number, there are detailing, car detailing, and beauty shops. And numbers of cars that can be there, numbers of a number of chairs in the shops and things like that in RA, RB. That is a situation with, I think, commercial use where maybe the standard to apply is a little more amorphous, which is the activity that's happening at that site reasonable for a residential area for that residential area. So on the one hand, well, how busy is that? Well, if it's a proverbial little old lady who just goes to church and the store a couple of times a week, there's hardly any sort of movement around there. If it's a married couple with 4 children, 3 of them are in high school, and they've got a bunch of activities and wide friend groups, well, and 4 of them drive, well, it's a hell of a lot of activity, but still reasonable. So I think it's sort of using those use standards. I don't think we should be limiting the size of the beauty shops and houses, or telling people that they're part of the retail, particularly since these are extremely low entry home-based businesses that are very useful in moving people. So.
But there are presently regulations that govern sort of home businesses like that. And I don't remember the details of them, but are we in effect superseding those regulations? Are we reading those into what would be trotted out here?
Yeah, I mean, we're expanding on top of that, I think. So the home-based businesses section is is coming in pretty much wholesale from what we have today. And this is a different type of thing. I mean, it was really focused a lot on this idea of the accessory commercial space. And allowing a range of uses there. Home-based businesses are, I think it's a step above a home-based business. It's allowed to have presence. Home-based business is meant to be completely invisible in a sense. This is a step above. It can be visible, but therefore has another set of standards that apply to it in terms of scale and all things that we can add further onto that as well.
I mean, I've been getting, I expect all of you all have emails bombarding us with graphics that have only slightly deceptively shown what would happen if you put a 7-Eleven next to your house. But it does raise a significant issue for a lot of folks who would say, I don't mind having one of those in a block. I don't know that I want to have the entire block that way. And that gets back to the question of whether there is some way to ration these kinds of uses so that we don't, and I was thinking in particular about the area at the intersection of Rose Hill Drive and Rugby Avenue, where there's a cross that is suggested of RC and RB continues on. And I was thinking about it particularly, frankly, with the notion of over 4,000 square feet being permitted in RC, but I'm told that's not the case. And I'm sitting there thinking, why are we even bothering with the charade of calling this a residential neighborhood?
So the residential neighborhood, we're still talking about the scale and form of the buildings. They're still gonna have to, if you're coming in as a commercial use, the most you're gonna be able to do is incorporate a storefront onto an otherwise residential appearing building.
And where is that made clear in what we've got so far?
In the module 1, the form-based code and how they're supposed to fit, where the driveways go, sometimes in module 2, they can't have, we can't have like a 7-Eleven with like all these cars in front of the buildings, the driveway in a certain way, and it has to look like a house and be neighborhood scale.
And it can't be auto-oriented in that way, right? Like, I would say those graphics were pretty deceptive, right? There were 3 examples. One was the tobacco hut in the middle of Greenbrier. One was the row of 7-Elevens with a bunch of parking in front. And then the other was the Brady Avenue Mini Mart, which has coexisted right next to and in front of single-family homes for decades, right? And that was the only one that even remotely complied with the Module 1 form standards, because they don't allow, that kind of auto-oriented use with the big parking lot in front. And so because of that, it has to be something that serves the surrounding neighbors that primarily probably walk there, or maybe, stop in on-street parking for a couple minutes, like the one at Bowling and Avon. But you could not put a 7-Eleven there, right?
I think of Avon Street as an example of how the sort of, I don't know, it's not really accurate to call it mixed use, but a variety of uses on a street can work very well. And I've lived in places where it has worked very well. I'm also aware that there were a number of proposals that were made a year or 2 ago around the notion of mixed use nodes that people went ballistic over. And the rationale for having this kind of area where there might be something of a concentration of RCs or something, it reminds me very much of the rationale for a mixed use node, which I thought we were getting away from. And I'm just, the overall rationale of a mixed use node was that it was supposed to be something that would serve, I think they usually say about a 3/4 of a mile radius of people who might walk or bike to there instead of getting in their car and going 2 miles to Kroger or something. But I still don't see that I just don't see that we're going to have the the topology in Charlottesville to make that work. And I'm just concerned that we're going to create possibilities that we might come to, that have very little upside, a lot of downside. But hopefully we'll talk about that more.
That's fantastic. Mr. Mitchell, do you have a draft? Mr. Bronze, you have a draft? Mr. Pop?
I guess.
Sounds great.
There was one comment that I read, I think it was number 39 about the Fifth Street and why kind of downzone from CX 8 to CX 5, kind of like that Wegmans area. Lion, yeah, that kind of stuff. And why you wouldn't, there's really, what 64 is going to be a lot of that. There isn't anything there. And why not have that go up to CX 8?
Did we cover that last time? When we talked about barracks?
Sounds familiar.
That wasn't here last time, so.
Well,
I think we covered that one.
But it was on the attachment to.
yeah, I mean, I agree.
I just
Okay.
glanced on it, but yeah, good, 5, 8, 10, okay.
I agree, this is great. You want to pick another?
There is one, I guess, I don't know if you guys covered it or not. It was 107. It was another project that was proposed. It was a Will Be project, 610 Harris Road. It's currently R3 and it's going to RC is proposed and the it's number 107.
So that's, go back down to the food line area. That's this, right?
It is next to RA, but I think there's a project in the works that I think there were concerns about it meeting RC.
They want RX3.
Then they want RX3 from RC, which is 3 floors. So it's not much difference except on the density. They have a preliminary site plan of 48 units.
Has that been approved?
That has access.
Active preliminary site plan is 48.
There's no access to that property.
I think they said in their email that they were working that out or something.
It'd be a really challenging thing to work out, given the external circumstances of that.
Discussion on this item?
We'll speak across. I mean, I think in the spirit of kind of the late 2021 era, like when Citizens for Responsible Planning was saying, hey, like, let's make the best use of our vacant land. I think it does make sense to allow more there in terms of you put more on vacant land, there's less in the not so vacant places, less disruption to existing neighborhoods. I was worried that was all floodplain, but apparently it's not. But I mean, obviously they'd still have to resolve those complicated access issues.
But they can do it
but that's
internal to their
separate
site
problem.
instead of
Yeah.
having to subdivide their giant lot to be able to build them.
So
Which they can't because they can't do it with access into it.
Additional thoughts on this one?
So currently it's, the zoning is shown as,
R3, right, now, and it's shown as RC and they're requesting it to be RX3.
they're asking for RX3. And so it shows up on the land use map as medium intensity. So this would be an upzoning example.
Yes.
and then that RB parcel is the same side too. So I don't know why those are different. Yeah. I mean, I assume
We can add
double
it
access
to
things.
the list to make them all RX3. So we can make something they're doable.
Additional thoughts on this?
What's the proposal?
To change,
So these two big empty lots to RX3, because they're currently R3.
That's the one from the developer that we got email from.
That's Woodard or something. Same sheet.
I don't have firm views on this one.
That makes sense to me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schwartz.
I'll pass.
Mr. Stolzenberg.
Let's see here. Well, if you go to kind of north downtown, this area, this is a plum change that I talked about, but this whole area west of First Street is all R3 right now. It's all pretty dense houses that have been largely split up, and it's all been downsized to RA, which is general residential plum. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me, given that it's already been divided into, in many cases, more than triplexes. It would need a plum change, so I have to go on that list, but you know, if you look at the, what?
What's your proposal, RC?
Yeah, or B or RC.
Thoughts on this one?
We did get one comment. I think 415 McIntyre sent us something. I don't remember what number it is.
That guy is a little confused though.
I was a little confused trying to find this person on the map.
But here's kind of this area, all those different colors that aren't light yellow are apartments of various kinds. So you can see it's kind of already been very much sort of eclectic mix of stuff. The 450 McIntyre, one of these parcels is split in the back, and there's a little duplex down there. It's currently R3 also, but given the size and the constraints in RC, I think you actually probably could build more under RA. I don't think you could build 3 in R3, but yeah. He also said he was writing it out. It's not legal, but just leaving that whole R3 area as R B or C or something. B probably be most sense. Given that a lot of these are already 6+s and such. And then this kind of gets into this whole Second Street thing, which is that like a lot of these already are subdivided as well. And the kind of the pattern of between First and Second is that most of the houses face First and then have these backyards on Second that they've like subdivided off over the years and developed. So like this right here is currently a little block of R3 because it's all townhouses. And you know, these are empty lots. There's actually in the sheet, apparently, so I proposed this back in late 2021, but apparently some of these property owners are like, yeah, I have a big empty backyard and we're right next to downtown. It's like one of the best places in the city to live near downtown. You know, why are we gonna not let them develop it like everyone has been for the last 120 years? And so I think I had a list of places to make RC in there. Back in my 2021 proposal, of course, all of those will require plum changes, so.
That makes sense in that it's just so close to downtown. Everything else looking down is higher intensity.
Particularly since we're matching most of, we're matching a lot of the conditions on the ground.
Yeah.
I walked around here quite a bit with this one in mind. I agree, it seems reasonable. I see time. Final statements. I would also entertain a motion at this time. Please.
Before you do that,
Please.
how comfortable are you with where we are and what more needs to be done on this?
I feel like I've heard everything. So the approach we took was that you asked members to identify those areas on the map where they had concerns that they wanted to discuss at the table. So if there's no other areas that we need.
Well, that's what I'm worried about. I'm not certain we've gotten them all.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
We're meeting again on the 13th.
I'm
Different
gonna focus on
topic
the
then.
13th, so I mean, maybe before we do the motion, let's talk about the meeting the next meeting is gonna focus on particular rules in the RA, the RB, and the RC. So how those standards are written, I've got a list of topics that I'm gonna present to you guys. And then including commercial uses and some of the things that we've touched on here. And then we're also gonna talk about module 3 and some of the highlights in there.
So do we feel pretty good about all of the map stuff besides RA, B, and C? Are there any lingering issues on those? Like the more intense stuff?
One lingering issue that I don't know that we've really talked about, but it's sort of been nagging at me, is that it seems like there are a number of instances, and the discussion about Fifth Street and Willoughby was one of them. The discussion about the SUP that is coming on, or is here on Ivy Road, and is another. Some discussion about Barracks Road is another. This notion that at least on the outskirts, we should feel free to build to the skies. That we should be more willing to build 8 and 10-story buildings there. Pardon me for my Lord of the Rings reference, but I keep thinking of the statues of the Argonath. When you come in and you're to be surrounded by these tall buildings on either side. It just, I don't know. But is the theory simply that, well, let's put them there because we're only going to be inconveniencing city people on half of it, one side, and the other side is inconveniencing county people? I mean, or making it ugly for county people. I'm concerned that we don't end up with such a foreboding entrance in some places. I mean, there's a limit to what the entrance corridor regulation process will bring to us once we've legitimized that use.
So I think a lot of the motivation is kind of the opposite, is that we have these terrible entrances where they're not terrible in that they're tall towers, but they are like abysmal strip malls that in some cases are half vacant and falling down. And those are really the entrances to the city. And so if you want that to change to something that, is a more urban form, and I would say more welcoming and feeling like you're entering the city than a bunch of parking lots and, off in the distance, strip mall, allowing things to happen there, encouraging things to happen there by incentivizing them with more potential, means they're more likely to shift. Just like the UVA's Ivy Corridor plan talks about turning that from this suburban strip mall kind of feel into an urban, entrance gateway. I think aesthetically, we definitely need to be thinking of them as the true entrance corridors to the city and making things look good. But I think tall things can look good as long as they have cornices.
It just sort of feels like what we're creating are towers that you have to come through to be admitted to our city.
Is 10 stories really a tower?
For Charlottesville, it
I
is.
mean, it is, but it's, it seems to me that these areas are also areas that have the best infrastructure or the most accommodating infrastructure. They're all, one of like Fifth Street, we've got the highway and we've got Fifth Street, which is a very wide road that can handle the traffic. Some of them with, up on 250 and near Barracks Road Shopping Center. Some of the other areas that we've discussed. And they're also not bumping up against county as much as UVA or just nothing. They're up against, the highway.
Okay, my point's still the same. We're only offending people on one side.
Well, no, I don't think-
We're only offending Charlottesville people on one side.
Well, how is that offending Charlottesville people? Is I guess
On
what my
Fifth Street,
concern.
you're back on 64, and on the other side, you have Wegmans.
Well, can I, but on the list about offending, the infrastructure aspect of it is a little bit questionable because in some of these cases, the Fifth Street one in fact is the only real access you have is via driving. I mean, we don't have good pedestrian, these are areas that are not inherently walkable right now. And so in some respects, I've kind of thought that the idea that while we're creating some of that density allowance to allow redevelopment, which is positive for these areas, right? Breath of new life and all that, but we aren't necessarily going to the top of what we can possibly allow, because we don't necessarily have the diversity of infrastructure that we have towards the core of the city. We don't have the inherent walkability that we have towards the core of the city.
Well, I think I would say that's a little bit self-defeating, in that, like, I think if you allow on the higher end, you get a whole lot of people there, it creates an impetus to say, hey, you better get your act together and get, the Seminole Square to be connected to pedestrian stuff. You put a few people there, you're like, yeah, well, it's not enough to like make it worthwhile, and now all of those people are, isolated out in the boonies of a giant parking lot. Where, and kind of what we were aiming to do back before my time with like the hydraulic small area plan is to make that, a little hub of pedestrian walkability of its own. And I certainly see Fish Street going the same way. And, you're probably not in the near term going to make Fish Street a lovely place to bike, but, you have an egress onto Harris that you can cut up, kind of through Johnson Village and Fifield to get places, or, just up Harris to get to UVA. That's for most people who live over there. And so, yeah, I think if you go halfway with it, that's where you run into trouble, because you just end up with kind of your like suburban dense apartments like you find on Pantops and in other places in the county, where they will always be car dependent and never be walkable because there just isn't enough there to make it work.
I would love a motion at this time.
Yes, Chair, I would like to recognize that July 5th is National Workaholics Day. And that we should accordingly adjourn and celebrate it by taking the rest of the day off.
I hear a second. All in favor, aye, please.
Aye.
I hear aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All in favor, please stand.
Wow.
We're probably gonna write something.